we need to sort of clarify and give a different name to fatty liver. I think part of it was because it kind of sounds bad, right? Fatty liver, you know, you're a fatty.
Anything to follow up from our last conversation?
No, you're right.
Okay.
And Your Honor, Mr. Kaufmann and I gave Mr. Desotell the no-no list, and he actually added a couple of keys to that.
Okay.
We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Give them the questions, make it go quicker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please be seated.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you as always for your service and for your patience. Going back to real life versus TV, I believe we'll have a different witness start today, and we'll go back to that other witness. So just a little heads up there, but our plaintiffs ready to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor, we call Jeffrey Desotell. Ladies and gentlemen.
Step, sir. You remain standing, raise your right hand, face the clerk, be sworn in.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Please be seated. State and spell your first and last name for the record.
Mr. Jeffrey Desotell.
And how do you spell it?
It's Jeffrey, and then last name is Desotell.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Desotell.
Good afternoon.
Could you tell the jury where you're from?
I'm currently from Henderson, Nevada,
Where are you from originally?
Detroit, Michigan.
Go to high school there?
Yes.
Where did you work after you left high school?
I went into the military,
In what branch?
Army.
And what were your jobs in the military?
It was actually several. First off was the airborne infantry with 2 units. Then went to be an instructor at the air assault school. Then I was a drill sergeant for 3 years. And then after that, I went to Hawaii. And then after that, I went to recruiting.
Okay, the drill sergeant, and you're one of those people that a lot of people would work the right way on TV.
Just forceful talking.
All right. Does the military have procedures,
Yes, they do,
and do they expect you to follow instructions?
to the letter.
And do you have a habit of doing that?
Yes, I do.
When did you come to Las Vegas?
It was August 25th, 2011,
And why?
for my wife's family.
Did it come to your attention that there was a job opening in Real Water?
Yes,
Approximately when?
2016.
And did you get interviewed?
Yes, I did.
Remember who interviewed you?
Blaine
Lane Jones?
Jones, correct.
Did you start at Real Water? When did you start at Real Water?
I want to say shortly after that. I don't remember the month.
Okay. Do you remember the year, 2017?
2016,
And you were there for how long?
about 8 months.
16 and part of 17?
Again, I don't remember the months.
Okay. All right. Did they call you Director of Quality Assurance?
Yes, they did call me that.
Were you really the Director of Quality Assurance?
No, I was not.
What were you?
I was a supervisor.
And you never been involved in quality control before working for Real Water?
No, I have not.
And no training with regards to quality control?
No, I have not.
Did you approve the way that the Real Water facility was run?
No, I did not.
Why not?
For one thing, when you're dealing with food substances or something for the public, first thing you gotta have is a HACCP program. It's a hazard analysis, critical control points.
HACCP.
Correct.
Okay.
And you've gotta have that in place, so you have your critical control points throughout the production of that product that has to be met. And if it's not met, then you stop the line, or you stop the process.
And did Real Water have a HACCP program?
And no, they did not.
In terms of how you would rate the operation, good, bad, or different, how would you rate it?
Or,
Why is that?
well, as a supervisor and as a manager, you have to go by good manufacturing practices. You must abide by those. That's basic cleanliness, conduct, how the operations is run in a fair and firm manner to, not only to your employees, but also for the product itself. And that was not done.
Okay, so they did not have good manufacturing principles?
Practices, yes.
Practices. Did they have operating procedures?
No, sir.
And in terms, you've worked at other places,
Oh, yes, yes, sir.
and among all the places you've worked, what was it, 10, 15? Not counting Army.
I'd say 8. 8.
How would you rate Real Water?
Poor.
Is there any place worse?
No, not that I have worked at.
Right. Did Real Water have a room where they made the concentrate?
There was a room that Blaine would go to. I was not allowed in that room, so I don't know what went on in that room.
So you don't know what they were doing in that room?
No, I do not.
Did you know that they were using titanium tubes to make something while you were at Real Water?
No, I did not.
So the time period you were there, you never saw the titanium tubes?
Never.
And you know whether or not they were putting electricity in the water?
No, I was not aware of that,
And you were supposedly the quality assurance director.
supposedly.
Were you shown customer complaints?
I only received one customer complaint.
Okay. And any other customer complaints during your time period you did not see?
I did not see them, no.
Okay, so let's start with customer complaints before you were there and while you were there, okay? So you have 23, please.
there may be a problem, sure.
All right, Shane, we have the first customer complaint that's 2017. I just have all of them, Your Honor, so I'm asking just for the first one, then I'll give you the number. These are all admitted exhibits.
I have that as 34, Mr. Chairman.
Is that 34?
Yeah, 34, isn't it?
Okay, let's have 34 up. So this is a complaint you never saw, right?
No.
Can I have 35, please?
You might want to clear up.
You did not. Did you see this complaint?
No, I have not.
Okay, next one. This is Mrs. Dorn, the jury heard her testimony. Did you see this complaint?
No, I have not.
Next one, please, Shane. Did you see this complaint?
No, no, I have not.
Next one. See this complaint?
No, no, I have not.
What number is that, Shane?
37.
37, okay. 38, please. See this complaint?
No, no, I have not.
38, I think is the next one.
39.
39. Mr. Fisher, the jury heard his testimony. Did you see this complaint?
No, I have not.
Next one, please. Okay, this is Mr. Fisher. You know about a complaint from someone named Fisher?
No, I don't recognize the name.
Okay, next one, please, Shane. job shaking. What number is that?
42?
Is that the, what number is that, 42?
42?
Is that 42? Okay.
40, 41, 44, 47. Oh, 42, isn't
It's a minute, John,
Oh.
but it's not the time period you want. Okay. Mr. Desotell, if you had known about these concerns, what if anything would you done?
Stop the line immediately
And why is that?
to prevent any further contamination or whatever's wrong with it from continuing to be produced.
Did management have a discussion with you about whether or not you should shut down production?
Yes, they did.
What did they tell you?
Well, during the meeting, they basically admonished me for trying to enforce the GMPs and cleanliness of the line to make sure that, the filling stations are cleaned properly and down the line to make sure everything's spotless.
Okay, by GMPs, what do you mean?
Good manufacturing practices.
And when you say they admonished you, they what?
They basically talked down to me and said, no, you will keep the line running.
And who is this?
Blaine and Amy
Jones?
Jones, yes.
And do you know why they were doing that?
Objection calls for speculation.
You can read. Did you feel pressure to keep the line running?
Yes, well, they're the managers. And they said, keep it running, keep it running.
Did there come a point in time that you quit?
Immediately following that, I started looking for another job.
And why?
Because I won't be a part of an organization that doesn't follow the rules and, cause problems for everybody we're selling the product to.
Thank you, Mr. Desotell.
I'm sure.
I'm just waiting for you to have your answers.
Thank you, yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Desotell. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Matt Kaufmann. I'm one of the attorneys for Real Water. Mr. Desotell, first, thank you for your service. 21 years is a long time to spend in any one organization in my opinion. Now, you said that you believe you started you were at Real Water for about 8 months, am I correct?
Yes, give or take.
And you believe that was like 2016, 2017?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach?
Uh,
I just wanted,
Sure, make
I've
sure.
already seen it.
Okay, yeah.
all right, Mr. Desotell, I'm gonna hand you this. Can you just take a look at it and answer a few questions about it? The first thing I want to ask you, is this your handwriting?
Appears to be.
Okay, can you read, and I see you're kind of extending out of it. Can you see the dates running down the
Yep.
left side?
Yes, I can.
And those dates are all from approximately late March of 2018 through April of 2018, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
After seeing this document, do you still believe you were at Real Water between 2016 and 2017, or do you think it could have been a little bit later in time?
A little bit later.
Okay, so you think you were there in 2018, 2017? Do you think you quit before the end of 2018?
I believe so.
Okay.
Again, it's been, over 6 years. So,
And given that it's been over 6 years, do you remember your training at Real Water?
there was no training at Real Water.
Were you provided any documents to review?
No.
Okay, and you said you did review one customer complaint, right?
One customer complaint was
And
given to me.
what was that complaint about?
It was a complaint with a foreign object in the bottle.
And what'd you do?
Well, I conversed with Blaine, trying to figure out what happened, where, what, who, when.
Were you able to figure out anything?
No. We could not figure it out. We can only assume what happened.
So So you say you don't recall seeing any SOPs from Real Water?
No,
How many jobs have you had since you left the military?
7 or 8.
How many of them have been in manufacturing?
All of them except for one.
And have they all been in management?
Yeah, supervisor or some type of manager or as a manager, yes.
And prior to working at Real Water, did you ever work in a food manufacturing facility before?
Not food manufacturing, no.
Okay. And did you take your job seriously at Real Water?
I don't understand the question.
Did you try and do a good job?
Of course I do, every
Thank
day.
you. Thank you, sir.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Any questions from any jurors? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
No,
Just watch your head.
I will.
All right. Run, run. No. All right.
Okay, who's next?
No, I'd like to be called to the stand, Dr. Hutson.
Okay. Welcome back, Doctor. You understand your story, oath?
I do.
Good afternoon, Doctor.
I'm Mr. Parker.
Good afternoon, everyone. So when we left off, Dr. Hudson, we just gotten finished going over the FDA documents. Recall that?
Yes, sir.
All right. So now we're going to get to your opinions in this case, okay? Based upon your review of all the documents, your review of the medical records, and give the jury your opinions on each of the plaintiffs.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to try to do this in short order. I'll do my best, but we got a lot of plaintiffs, of course, and they're all somewhat different. Okay? Shane, can you bring up for me slide number 20? So you recognize the children here as well as the adults?
I do.
So and you've given opinions on each of these plaintiffs, correct?
I have.
Let's go to the next document. So the next 2 pages or slides is a summary of the plaintiffs, their hospitalization dates, their AST and ALT scores. Not all of their scores are here, some of them, because of the amount of times they actually took a blood test, aren't all here, but the majority of them are here. Do you recognize these?
Yes, sir, I do.
And you recognize the hospitalization dates?
I do.
Okay, and you can tell from the hospitalization dates, most of the hospitalizations took place in November and December.
That's correct.
And based upon your review of the MMWR, that's within that same period of time.
Same time period.
Let's go to your first opinion. Slide 25. So this is Christopher Noah Wren, not to be confused with his father, Christopher Brian Wren. Do you recall, is this your opinion in terms of what caused his acute liver failure?
Yes, sir, it is.
And is it also your opinion that his acute liver failure ultimately led him to being transported by Flight for Life from Las Vegas to the Primary Children's Hospital?
Yes, sir, that was required.
And then finally, is it your opinion that his acute liver failure was due to the consumption of real water?
It was.
Your second opinion. Is this your opinion in terms of Mr. Christopher Bryan?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, and is it your opinion that Mr. Wren also suffered acute liver failure caused by his consumption of real water?
It is.
Right. Let's go to his wife, Emily. Is this your opinion as well?
Yes, sir, it is.
did Emily develop gastrointestinal symptoms and central nervous system side effects secondary to acute liver failure due to consumption of real water?
An acute liver injury, yes, sir. She did not have failure, but she had injury.
And that was again due to her drinking of real water.
Correct.
Next opinion. And you remember Carrie?
I do.
Is this your opinion in terms of what caused her acute liver failure?
Yes, sir, it is.
And she too was also taken by flight for life from Las Vegas to the Primary Children's Hospital in Utah, correct?
She was.
She was also biopsied, correct?
That's correct.
Were all of those things due to her liver injury caused by her consumption of real water?
They were.
Now, you also indicate in this opinion that she developed musculoskeletal issues that are secondary to her periods of illness, as well as physiologic stress.
That is correct.
Could you explain that to the jury, please?
Sometimes patients can develop musculoskeletal tightness of tendons, muscle problems, sometimes joint problems when they have been ill. We see it more often in older people that get hospitalized and they develop a lot of musculoskeletal issues. Certainly less common in young people. But when you have these repeated episodes of illness, as Hera did, then you can sometimes end up with these musculoskeletal and tendon ligament issues.
And that was also as a result of her drinking real water.
That's correct.
Next opinion, please. Severin Morales, you recognize him as well?
I do.
And you have the opinion that he developed acute liver failure?
Yes, sir.
Also, also requiring him to be transported by flight for life from Las Vegas to the Primary Children's Hospital.
That's correct.
A liver biopsy was also done with Severin, correct?
That is right.
Now, in terms of his liver biopsy, were you aware that Dr. Datnow reviewed the biopsy slides?
I am aware.
Right. Dr. Datnow testified in this case. Were you aware of that?
I am.
Were you aware of the fact that Dr. Datnow testified that Severin has bridging fibrosis in the November 2020 slides that he reviewed, and that he found multiple nodules in that area? Are you aware of that?
I am aware of that.
Are you aware of the fact that Dr. Datnow is a board-certified pathologist?
Yes, sir.
And if Dr. Datnow is correct in his review of Severin's biopsy slides, does that indicate a permanency of the injury to his liver?
Yes, sir, it does.
Is it your opinion that Severin's multiple stays or admissions into the hospital were as a result of his consumption of real water?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And just for the benefit of the jury, one more time, since we've had lunch and perhaps we've gotten some of this, Dr. Datnow's opinion would reflect a permanency of bridging fibrosis around certain areas of portals within the liver.
That is correct, as we discussed earlier on the pictures about the fibrosis.
In your experience, has a development of that level of fibrosis, and in fact, I believe he called it cirrhotic nodules, could lead to liver transplant?
Yes, sir.
Objection, Your Honor. Any other approach?
Sure. Dr. Hutson, I want to go back to what we were just talking about. I read the testimony from Dr. Datnow, and you recall reading that, correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
And Dr. Datnow testimony, sworn testimony before this jury, board certified pathologist, was that he saw cirrhotic nodules in Severin's biopsy slides.
Yes, sir.
All right, I want to distance you for a second from Severin and just talk about your general experience. Understood?
I understand.
In your experience as a board certified hepatologist, when you've seen those types of cirrhotic nodules. Has that ever indicated the need for some form of liver transplant?
At some point, that is an irreversible situation, irreversible scarring. How quickly that progresses to a liver transplant is variable, but it always progresses.
Thank you so much. Now let's go to your next. And this is your opinion as to London wings. You recall reviewing London's medical records.
Yes, sir, I did.
And is it your opinion that London also suffered acute liver failure requiring life flight from Las Vegas to the primary children's hospital?
She did.
And was that due to her consumption of real water?
Yes, sir, it was.
Can you indicate in this opinion that London consumed real water not only from the 5-gallon jugs, but also the retail bottles? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Opinion number 7, please. Your opinions for Lyric are also similar, I would say.
That is correct.
And what are your opinions in terms of Lyric?
That she developed acute liver failure secondary to the consumption of real water.
And again, that's the 5-gallon jugs and the retail bottles.
That is correct.
Opinion number 8. Mr. Tagano, you've met with Mr. Tagano.
I have.
And you've spoken to all of these plaintiffs.
I've spoken
or
to
the
all
parents.
plaintiffs. Yes, sir.
And did he also develop acute liver injury due to his consumption of real water?
He did.
And this is summation, the next opinion. When you were doing, this is the differential diagnosis we spoke about earlier. When you did your evaluation of all of these plaintiffs, you tried to figure out if there was something else that could cause their injuries, correct?
I did.
And was this opinion discuss that?
It does.
And could you explain it to the jury one more time, please?
So, as I mentioned before, when patients come into the hospital, what I or any of my colleagues do, particularly in the field of hepatology, when you're looking for a liver injury, you've really got to be exhaustive and look for all the things. And toxins, drugs, alcohol, hepatitis, viruses, funguses, bacteria. So all that has to be done on a patient so you know what you're doing, because some of them are more reversible than others, or some are a little less toxic than others. So you want to know so you know how to proceed, and maybe how quickly you might have to proceed with a liver transplant. So all that stuff is done, and I tried to be very careful in looking through all the records of each one of these patients to make sure all that was done. And they really, the other hospitals actually really did an excellent job.
And then let's go to summary of your opinion number 10. So this is what we talked about in the Loma Linda publication earlier today, or this morning. 2 out of the 4 biopsies showed some form of fibrosis.
That is correct.
And we know from Dr. Datnow's sworn testimony that Severin also showed some form of fibrosis, cirrhotic nodules in that.
That is correct.
So of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 biopsies that we're aware of, 3 of the 5 showed permanent damage. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Would that also indicate that more likely than not, that those who suffered acute liver injuries by consuming real water also suffered permanent liver injuries?
Yes, sir.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
And is it fair to say that, the last part of this opinion, that I'm sorry, go back, Shane. That bridging fibrosis, which we saw in some of the slides, is a start that does not resolve and may be a precursor to cirrhosis.
That is correct.
And that is a concern that you would have for these patients.
Very concerned.
Now, based upon that concern, let's go to summary opinion number 11. And if you could you explain this opinion to the jury?
Well, it's kind of a long opinion, but just to sort of condense it down for you guys, these patients just really have to be followed. What we hope is that every single one of them will do well for years and decades to come. But I don't think you can just take that at guessing and faith. So I think these patients need to be monitored regularly, not every day, not every week, not every month, but maybe twice a year, They get blood tests, seen by their physician, physical examination, history to make sure there's nothing changing. And then I think a good test, there's this test that I do all the time at my practice called elastography. And it measures the stiffness of the liver. So rather than having to biopsy somebody, you don't want to have to biopsy these kids. These are all young kids. You do not want to have to stick a needle in their liver unless you're absolutely forced to. So this is a non-invasive way of trying to look at scarring of the liver. So this elastography measures stiffness of the liver. So it's kind of an indirect measure of fibrosis, but it's quite accurate. I probably do 8 to 10 of these tests a week in my office. And it's quite accurate, and I think these kids and these adults really should have that done once a year anyway, or maybe twice a year, depending on how quickly things may be changing. And this will give an idea of how we're progressing with these patients, whether they're going to get in trouble, whether they're already in trouble, or maybe everything's going to smooth out and they'll be great.
And in your experience dealing with patients for 35 years, do these tests bring some form of mental anxiety, some form of fear because of what the results may hold?
They definitely do, because, patients, in this situation that we're talking about today, but my patients in the last 35 years, they all have some anxiety about, gee, what's going to happen to my liver? Am I progressing, or am I okay? Am I going to do long term? And kids, you bring kids in for tests. Kids hate tests. And this is elastography is an easy test, but blood work's not easy for a kid. Kids hate that. They cry, they hate it. So, I think there's always some anxiety and hesitation in people with testing.
Yes. Can we go to 38, slide 38? Next. Based upon your review of the medical records, the medical bills, all the treatments received by the plaintiffs, do you believe that all of their medical care were reasonable and necessary?
I do.
And that the bills, in terms of the amounts customary for this, were kept,
Yes, sir.
as well as those at primary children's hospital?
Yes, sir.
Now, I want to hit a couple of high points on each of the plaintiffs, and then we'll be done, Dr. Hutson. Let's start with Severin. Go to slide 40, please, Shane. So this is a medical record related to Severin, and you can see the date at the top. And this talks about, appears to be a spinal tap. A lumbar puncture was done, dealing with his encephalopathy. Do you see that?
I do.
Is that something that's typical when you're trying to figure out what's causing the encephalopathy?
Well, it's not common. And it's certainly not in adults. We are not very often going to do a lumbar puncture. But when you have a young kid with mental status changes, you have to worry about meningitis. And it's always something that's always on our minds with a kid. And kids can't give you a history. The history comes mainly from the parents. The parents do their best job to tell what's going on with that kid. But you don't want to miss a diagnosis of meningitis in a kid, because that can kill the kid. So lumbar puncture, I think, was appropriately done in Severin. It's not easy. The kid has to be put under pretty much so they don't move. But yeah, I think it was necessary in Severin's situation, because he had such significant mental status changes.
41. This slide, this medical record, indicates that previously Severin was healthy. He was at Summerlin ER, and his liver function test 3,000 plus. And then his INR is at 8. When you see something like that in the emergency room setting, what's your concern with that?
Acute liver failure. And I'm going to alert the liver transplant center immediately. I'm sending this kid to you, or I'm sending this adult to you. We're preparing them right now, and they're coming.
42, please. Now, we got the history of encephalopathy, we have the MR brain without contrast, with and without contrast. So they've done the spinal tap, now they're doing the MR of the brain, or MRI of the brain. They're trying to figure it out, obviously.
That is correct.
And while they're trying to figure it out, the parents are suffering through it.
Correct.
And you've seen this happen before.
Many times.
And this is what you were talking about in terms of trying to figure out what's causing the problem, be it through a differential diagnosis, through a battery test, whatever you can do.
That is right.
At this point, are they just simply trying to save Severan's life?
They are.
Now I want you to take a look at 43, please. These are the ALT, AST scores. Are these high?
They're 100 times over normal.
And with scores this high, is that another confirmation, I guess, of what you need to do quickly to attend to this child?
That is correct.
I'm not going to show you each one of his ALT, AST scores, but you realize how high they were from the viewing records.
I do.
I want you to see slide 47, because this came up this morning. The ammonia as a part of this assessment plan at the end. You see that?
I do.
Is this the ammonia buildup that's a concern when you have a problem with the liver?
That's the one that I mentioned earlier in my testimony, the ammonia building up.
And is that part of the problem for people mentally when they're going through acute liver failure?
Yes, sir. Appears to be one of the key problems.
Then going to slide 49, please, Jane. This is, again, talking about biopsy, which we've already discussed, but I wanted to go back to this ammonia level. It says ammonia 16 on admission and 50 today. Is that going to get worse, getting better? What's happening there with the ammonia?
Well, ammonia can fluctuate. And that's one thing we know about ammonia. It can go up and down a little bit. So admitted 16 normal and then 50 is abnormal. And so that means this kid is still not recovered from his liver injury.
And does that mean that the parent is experiencing a kid at that point who's not acting normally yet?
That is correct.
Let's go to Noah, or Chris Noah. So, Christopher Noah had autism. Are you aware of that?
I am. I met him.
Have you ever treated a patient, child or adult with autism?
I've treated adults with autism.
Is it difficult for the adult to understand what's going on?
Yes, sir, it is.
Does it make it more difficult for a guardian or parent to be able to comfort the person?
Much more difficult.
And that's some anxiety that the parent or the guardian is going through when they're trying to shepherd their child through the process.
That is right, because it's hard.
And so, again, Christopher Noah, he's vomiting, he's got decreased appetite. Is that, again, some of the symptoms that are routine when you're suffering from acute liver failure?
Very common symptoms when you have acute liver failure. Somnolence, nausea, vomiting, altered mental status, weakness.
Let's go to slide 52, Shane. So here, Christopher Noah also has very high ALT, AST scores, is that correct?
He does.
And if you look at slide 54, they're increasing here.
That is correct.
Are these numbers high, be it a child or an adult?
Yes, they're similar between adults and children. The numbers are similar, the normal ranges are similar.
I want you to look at his assessment plan, which is slide 55.
Interesting, right? That at that point, somebody was realizing, wow, why are we seeing 3 kids from the same geographic area with acute liver failure? Acute liver failure, guys, is a very uncommon thing. It's very uncommon. And to have 3 kids in 2 weeks, no, you just don't see that. I've never seen that in my entire career. First time.
And then it says, our GI colleagues are looking into contacting the appropriate epidemiologic contacts for this. You see that?
I do.
So this was not just, you're telling the jury now how unusual that is. It was unusual for those people.
That is correct. They recognized it.
And is that something that typically happens when confronted with an unusual set of medical circumstances that people will try to collaborate to figure out what's going on?
Yes, sir. I think as physicians, we all try to be a little bit detectives, and you have to be detectives. So seeing something like this is a huge red flag. You've got to start thinking, what's the commonality? Has to be a commonality.
If we look at slide 56, I just have a quick question about this. This talks about medical decision-making, and it says overall criticism improving clinically and bioclinically. But it talks about ALF can reoccur. What does that mean?
What it means is that if somebody presents with acute liver failure, and more typically, when they say this, what they're referring to is if that insult continues, all right? So in this case, if somebody starts re-ingesting real water, then acute liver failure could recur. So for instance, he's getting better, right? He's gotten a lot better because he wasn't drinking real water.
Yeah.
Then you go back, starts drinking real water again, the acute liver failure could recur. It doesn't mean it will, it means it could. That was their concern.
Let's go to Harriet. And you recall looking at her medical bills and records.
I do.
And this little girl, 5 years of age, she also had an altered mental status, vomiting, dry heaving, dizziness, excessively thirsty. See that?
That's correct.
All of those symptoms that you customarily see again with acute liver failure.
Yes, sir.
What happens when they start, what causes them to dry heave? When there's nothing left in the stomach, why are they continuing to vomit like that?
Most of the time it's because of all the toxins that are built up in the blood. The liver simply can't clear everything that's circulating in your body. And remember when I told you guys before about the blood that comes from the portal vein into the liver cleanses it? Well, all those toxins get circulated everywhere else in the body. Everything's affected, the brain, the stomach, the gut, the heart, spleen, the kidneys.
So even when there's no more food left, and there's nothing left in the stomach, the liver is still trying to get something out of it, or out of the body.
That is right.
And that causes the vomiting or projectile vomiting we've seen in the legs.
Correct.
Understood. Next slide, Shane, please. So right now, she's got a 3,400 AST and a 419 ALT. Her scores actually go up.
They do.
We talked about this a little earlier. Her scores was probably some of the highest that you ever seen.
Yes, that 12, I think she hit at over 12,000, and that's some of the highest I've ever seen.
So go to the slide 61. Because we go from 4,000 a little while ago to now she's at 6,000 AST and over 4,000 ALT. And ammonia is up to 59. Where is this little girl in terms of the severity of her injury?
Very, very severe injury.
Is this where you're thinking transplant or she could die?
Yes, sir.
Slide 62. And this is what you were talking about earlier. I want to show it to you. An AST of 12,335 and an ALT of 2322. Is that a remarkable number in your opinion?
That is remarkable.
At that height of an AST, let me ask you this. Was that AST number for Hera, was that higher than any AST score you saw in the Loma Linda test?
Yes, it was.
If you go to slide 65. Okay. And I want you to look at this because I want you to explain, instead of thinking about the encephalopathy, this is a cerebral edema. I want you to discuss this or explain this to the jury.
Part of the reason people get encephalopathy is actually because of the swelling of the brain. Because the liver has malfunctioned so much, And all those toxic substances that normally get cleared by the liver now are in the systemic system. So they're being pumped by the heart everywhere. Well, the brain is part of that. Remember, our bodies do everything they can to maintain blood supply to the brain. So they'll shut down the kidneys, our bodies will shut down the kidneys, they'll shut down the heart, they'll shut down everything to maintain brain blood supply. So it's coveted by the body. So all that stuff that's circulating goes to the brain, and the brain's not used to the toxic substances. So what happens is the brain starts swelling. And fortunately, most of the time that swelling is temporary because we do have ways of treating it. In the ICU, we can treat brain swelling. There's multiple things we can do. But if that brain swelling continues unabated, then what happens is you can get what's called herniation of the brain. And that means the brain gets so swollen that it herniates out of our skull, brain dead at that point.
So those are the possible consequences that this family was presented with because of their consumption of marijuana.
That is correct.
I want you to take a look at slide 66. And this is the biopsy of heroin. And you could explain the final diagnosis of this biopsy procedure to the jury.
Okay, so I'll just sort of break it down. So again, hepatocyte, I told you guys that's the liver cell. That's the basic liver cell. Steatosis means fat. And this has been a really common thing I've seen in every one of these patients, not only these patients, but all the patients that I've studied. They all develop fatty liver. So, and when you go back and look at the data back in the 1960s, which I covered with you guys earlier with the rats and the mice and the monkeys, they all develop steatosis, fatty liver. So it seems that hydrazine causes fatty liver in pretty much everybody. So this is consistent with that. So, why does a little kid have steatosis? Little kids don't get steatosis unless it's some kind of toxin. So that tells you something right there. Ballooning means that the liver cells are exploding. When they balloon first and then they die. So ballooning is a really inflamed liver cell. Portal edema, if you guys remember, I told you earlier on when I was talking about the liver, the portal tract is part of the central mechanism of the liver, the central morphology of the liver. So they get edematous. It's like we were talking about edema of the brain. Ductal reaction, a little less of a severe thing, but it means the bile ducts are under attack as well, which is a little less common in acute liver injury like this, but you can see some ducts being attacked. And then, of course, the mild inflammation. The inflammation is pretty much unique in an acute liver failure.
Thank you. Simply put, Kara was in a really tough medical position.
Tough situation.
Putting the parents also in a very tough situation.
Yes, sir.
So let's go to Larry Williams next. Go to 68. And I want you, I don't know if you've seen this, have you seen the video of Larry Williams? Hutson?
I did not see the video, no, sir.
Shane, could you put up, I believe, Exhibit 74 is the video of Larry Williams, Your Honor? I believe it's been admitted already. 794, I believe.
Oh, 794. Yeah, that's it.
And if you could, Your Honor, can I have Dr. Hutson step down? Thanks. And I think I have the pointer that he likes so much here.
Who took my pointer?
I'll give it back. So I'm gonna need you to stop it little by little. Shane, if you get started. I want you to tell me first, what is going on here? What are these balloons or bags around here? What's the purpose of that? And then if you tell me what's all hooked up to it, so the jury can understand what's going on.
Okay, so these things are heating blankets. Because what happens is when patients, sometimes little kids, it's more common in little kids, when they get liver failure, their core body temperature drops down. So, our temperature would be 37 degrees centigrade. Sometimes these kids' core body temperature will go down. So that's one reason. The other reason is, and I don't know because I wasn't there, so I'm just guessing. The other thing is that when people develop swelling of the brain, we want to cool down the body. Okay? So, so these could be cooling blankets. I don't know which they are, whether they're heating blankets or cooling blankets. They both basically look the same. So we want to cool the body if you have brain edema. You want to heat the body if that core body temperature goes down. Quite honestly, I think these are probably heating. I think these are probably heating blankets. So I'm guessing her core body temperature probably went down. And then this is a tube that goes into her lungs, so that's called intubation. That's an NG tube. That's a tube that goes into her stomach to decompress the stomach and make sure she doesn't have vomiting. You know, that would be a really terrible thing because then they can aspirate. The lungs can get pneumonia. It's the last thing you need in a little kid or an adult for that matter. So that's what all this stuff is. Keep going.
Are you accustomed to seeing someone going through this level of acute liver failure being relatively unresponsive?
Well, I am, yes. But this is not a common occurrence. As I said before, acute liver failure is a very rare thing.
And when it
And
happens,
since I've been doing this so long, I've seen this many times.
and this is something that you're accustomed to seeing.
Yes, sir.
When someone's suffering from severe acute liver failure, they become unresponsive.
They become unresponsive and they look really sick, really bad.
Is that the end of it? Thank you. Keep going.
That's all.
All right, let me see 795. The 795 is also admitted terms?
Hold on, let's see. I think 795.
Oh,
795 A is it? 795 is.
I believe we stipulated, we should have stipulated a 795 yesterday, I believe, but that wasn't one on the clerk's list. So I think just for clarity of the record, we would seek to admit the entirety of the video 795, which was played with Dr. Guthrie as well as Ms. Williams yesterday.
No objection, Your Honor, but free press will true.
So, Dr. Hudson, this video is a longer video, it's about 2 minutes. But I want you, when you get up from the stand, to explain what they're trying to do in terms of stimulating this, okay?
Okay.
Shane, can you play the video, please?
John, can you step up?
Sure.
Can you all hear it?
Can you turn the volume?
So what they're doing right now, guys, is what we call verbal stimuli. Okay, so trying to talk, see if you can stimulate the child that way. And then tactile stimulation. So see how they're touching, a minute ago they were touching the chest, touching the legs, moving them around a little bit. Moving the blankets. It's all tactile stimulation. And part of it is trying to make sure the child is in a comfortable position. So, you know, getting the blankets underneath, making sure that the joints and the extremities are not in weird positions that would lead to any kind of nerve compression or damage to the skin.
Is it usual that you want them on their back with their extremities?
Yes, sir.
And are you hoping to get some kind of reaction from the patient at this point?
You are. Yep. You're trying to, you know, talk, make noise, move the child a little bit, move the extremities, and see if they respond.
So at this point, Larry's eyes appear to be completely closed, and she does not seem to be participating in the movement of her body.
That's right. You can see that they're lifting and they're stimulating, but she's not spontaneously moving. What you really hope to see is they're spontaneously moving one or more of the extremities. And she's just not doing that.
And what are all of the lines that are attached to her legs?
Now, this is a femoral line here going into her groin. This is a catheter into the bladder for kidney, for urine, okay? But they put a large line into the groin here because that's a very accessible vein in kids. Kids are hard to stick, particularly this age. Their veins are really tiny. So you have to go for a larger vein here in the groin. And we all have femoral veins there that are very accessible and usually quite successful.
So despite now almost over roughly 2 minutes now, we're done. Did you ever see her move?
I did not.
Is that an indication of how sick she was?
That tells you that she's in a coma, and that means encephalopathy. Encephalopathy, we have grades for everything in liver disease. I'm sure you guys are realizing that now. So grade 0 is normal. There's a grade 4 encephalopathy. Grade 4 encephalopathy is a coma. That's what she's got, the worst you can have.
Thank you so much, Papa. And looking at her ALT, AST scores, slide 66. Again, those are high.
Super high.
And if you look at slide 69, this speaks of the acute encephalopathy. You see that? 69.
Yes. Yeah, they did intubation, and this was all because of the lack of responsiveness and the slow heart rate, so she needed to be intubated.
And let's say hepatic encephalopathy. Is that a direct tie of her encephalopathy to her acute liver failure?
That is correct.
If you could go to slide 70. I believe this is something that no parent wants to see. But at this point, the medical records are concerned about further organ system dysfunction or death. Is that how close Lyra came to death?
Yes, sir, it is.
And was that the level of seriousness that most of these parents face?
Yes, sir.
Let's go to 73, and this is London. I think London wins the award with the most enthusiastic smile.
I agree.
And she, like her sister, her twin sister Lyra, suffered acute liver failure, is that correct?
They both did.
If we could go to 74, it appears that she was also suffering from projectile vomiting, and she was sent to Primary Children's Hospital.
That's correct, within a day of her sister.
Is that also unusual, to have twin sisters suffering from acute liver failure?
Wow, never seen it in my life.
If you could go to 76, Jim, I want you to explain this preliminary report. What does this mean?
This means that on ultrasound, they saw a lesion that, which is a spot on the liver that's not normally seen in anybody, including a child. And again, it's hard to characterize that. It's small. It's only 1.2 centimeters, so it's a pretty small thing.
Is there any significance to it being adjacent to the main portal vein?
Not really, no.
What would cause a lesion?
Well, most of the time, quite honestly, it's a cyst. It's a benign cyst. But you've got a child here, an acute liver failure, so, you start worrying, could this be blood? Because the child, all of these kids, their blood didn't clot correctly. They all had high INRs. So when you see a lesion like that, it's probably a cyst, but you want to be sure it's not blood.
And then you go to slide 78. It appears both London and Larry were so ill that they were concerned about complete organ shutdown and death. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Let's go to our first adult, Christopher Brian Wren. This is Christopher Nola's father. Did you also review his medical records?
I did.
And based upon your review of his medical records, did he have suffer acute liver failure?
Yes, sir, he did.
And was that also due to his consumption of real water?
Yes, sir.
And if we go to slide 83, Shane. This medical record indicates that he was vomiting 4 or 5 days, abdominal pain, he had elevated LFTs, AST of 3416 and AST of 1176. Do you see that?
I do.
He also had an INR of 6.5. Was Mr. Wren also in bad shape?
He was. It's a very high INR.
So not unlike his son, he was suffering from acute liver failure.
Correct.
And not unlike children, this is something that adults and children require quick medical attention.
That's correct.
And based upon your review of the record, did he in fact receive that medical?
He did.
And I'll move on to Emily. Slide 88, please. Did you also speak with Emily?
I did.
And although Emily did not have elevated LFTs, was her symptomology similar to Brian's?
It was very similar.
And was she also consuming real water like her son and her husband?
She was.
And as a result, did you find that she also suffered acute liver failure?
Objection, misstates his testimony.
Any response?
Now, I don't know what he misstated. I asked the question, he gave an answer.
Oh, well, he has an answer.
Oh, I can rephrase it if that makes it easier. Do you believe that she suffered, Your Honor, I believe I know what the issue is. Let's see if I can prove this for you. Do you believe that she suffered gastrointestinal problems as a result of consuming real water?
I do.
All right. Now, let's talk about Mr. Tagano. And you've reviewed Mr. Tagano's medical records as well?
I have.
And you know, of course, he was in the hospital in November twice, as a matter of fact.
That's right.
Looking at slide 91, his AST and ALT were elevated, is that correct?
That's correct.
From your review of his medical records, did you see that he passed out while at lab court?
Yes, sir.
Now, we talked about this morning. That type of mental issue is consistent with liver failure.
That's correct.
He also had an increase in his AST and ALT the second time he got blood tested.
That's right.
If you go to 92, please. Oh, there it is. Is that somewhat consistent in terms of most of these patients? You see the elevation in their liver function test?
Yes, sir.
And did he, in your opinion, suffer acute liver failure?
Yes, sir, he did.
Are you aware of the fact that Mr. Tagano had subsequent liver tests in 2022 as well as 2024?
Yes, sir.
Let me show you slide 94. This was done on January 25th, 2022. Exhibit 827, which has been admitted into this case. What's your impression of this impression?
Well, what I would be worried about is this continuation of abnormal liver test as a direct result of the injury that he occurred a few years earlier, secondary to the real water.
Let me show you 2 months later, he took another blood test, and this was the impression. Again, would you have the same concern?
I have the same concern because, as I mentioned before, uniformly, people that are exposed to real water with hydrazine develop fatty liver.
Is fatty liver a bad thing?
It can be, yes, sir, because it can lead to scarring and cirrhosis.
And then finally, just a few months ago, in March of 2024, another blood blood test, and this was the result. Are these later tests showing a consistency in his abnormal liver function?
It does.
Would that concern you if you were recently done?
Yes, sir.
Do you believe all of the acute liver failures that we discussed now, each of the plaintiffs, all caused by real water?
I do believe that.
I believe that's all I have. I'll pass the witness. Thank you so much, Mr. Dr. Hutson.
Just making
You're
sure.
cross, right?
I was just making sure you guys weren't doing anything. How you doing, Dr. Hudson?
I'm good.
First, thank you. That was a very thrilling lecture. I learned a lot about physiology that I didn't know before.
Thank you.
And so to start with, you're aware that Real Water has admitted that its product caused the acute liver failure of the 5 minor plaintiffs, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're aware that Real Water has admitted that its product caused Mr. and Mrs. Wren's injuries,
Yes, sir.
and that it caused Mr. Tagano's injuries as well,
Yes,
right?
sir.
Okay. Now, to start with, just a couple of things about your background, and I'm not going to dwell on this too much. Do you remember your deposition in this case?
Which part?
Let me start with the general.
I mean, I did a deposition.
Do you remember being deposed in this
Yes,
case?
sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Do you remember during your deposition, you said, I think you said you had roughly over the course of your career, less than 25 pediatric patients total? Is that fair?
I think that's right.
Okay. And you used to work for Dr. Guthrie, right?
I did.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but based on my understanding of your deposition, when you worked with Dr. Guthrie, the two of you worked in concert. Is that on pediatric patients?
Not only with Dr. Guthrie, but also with Dr. Book, who's his colleague. So that's correct.
And is Dr. Book another pediatric hepatologist?
She is.
Okay, I'm sorry, not
She.
she. So it's fair to say that when you did work on those pediatric patients, you were generally working in concert with a pediatric hepatologist?
That is correct.
Okay. You've published a lot of papers. Are any of your papers related to pediatrics, or are they all more adult focused?
They're all adult.
Okay. And looking through one of the other things I just wanted to ask you, fatty liver disease. During your deposition, you called it, I believe the phrase you used was metabolic. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, the new terminology came out just this year from liver societies that throughout the world. They all got together and decided we need to sort of clarify and give a different name to fatty liver. I think part of it was because it kind of sounds bad, right? Fatty liver, you're a fatty. I kid some of my patients. I have a good relationship with my patients. I say, oh, you're a fatty. But I don't mean it in disrespectful, but I think it can be a little bit offensive. So I think 2 reasons. One is I think that giving a new name gives a little bit more accuracy to fatty liver, because most fatty liver is due to what we call the metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is people that generally have obesity, hypertension, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, and diabetes. All right, those are your key factors of metabolic syndrome. So trying to put that together with fatty liver, they named it now metabolic dysfunction associated steatotic liver disease.
Wow.
Fatty liver was a lot easier, right?
Oh, yes, I agree, and I feel a little bit attacked for being called a fatty, but, anyways, moving on, Doctor. The other next thing I wanted to ask you about is, so my understanding is that acute liver failure has a specific medical definition, correct?
That is correct.
And generally speaking, in medicine, there are subjective symptoms, and that's things we talked about today, for example, nausea, fatigue, vomiting. That's the stuff that patients will report to a doctor that they're feeling, right?
Yes, sir.
And objective symptoms would be something like a blood test. And in this case, we'd be talking about the liver function test, correct?
That is correct.
And the other, and if you're part of an acute liver failure is having elevated AST and ALT, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Parker did a great job of that, so I'm not going to tread that too much. One of the other factors is your INR level, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I'm not disputing, let me take a step back. I'm not disputing what these kids went through was horrible. I'm not. And we're not here to make that argument. When INR is elevated, that's a problem, right?
That's probably one of the most significant things that you see in acute liver failure that gives a hepatologist like me the biggest worry, is when that INR goes up.
And my understanding is when your INR starts to dip down to normal, which I believe is around 1, your liver is starting to recover, or at least starting to function again?
Yes, sir. It's a great and a great good sign.
Okay. Now, once your INR starts, let me rephrase that. Once your liver starts to function again, at a certain point, you're no longer in acute liver failure, by definition, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So as we sit here today, none of the 5 children, Mr. Wren, Mrs. Wren, Mr. Tagano, none of them are actively in acute liver failure?
You are correct.
Okay. You would agree with me? I mean, I think you spoke very highly of Dr. Guthrie during your testimony. You agree that Dr. Guthrie and his team did a great job with the children?
They did a great job with these kids.
And you would agree that by the time the children were discharged, they were no longer in acute liver failure?
That is correct. They all still had a liver injury at that point, but they were no longer in acute liver failure.
Okay. Has our ability to treat liver injuries improved over the years?
Well, to a degree, we now use N-acetylcysteine, which is a glutathione-reducing medication.
I'm sorry, you lost me, doctor.
Let's go
I don't
back.
think I was looking for anything that technical. I was
Okay.
just,
All right, you in general? Yeah, I tend to be very specific.
Understandable.
But yeah, I will say we've made some strides. And we have Mars. Earlier in the testimony, I mentioned you guys about that machine that we can use to support the liver temporarily while waiting for a liver transplant. We never had that when I was in training. That's a relatively new thing. So yes, sir, we've made some improvements.
Okay. And you said that pediatric acute liver failure is a rare thing, correct?
Correct.
So that's a good thing, right?
It's a good thing.
Okay. Now I'm just going to kind of quickly take you through the plaintiffs, if I could.
Yes, sir.
Just ask you a couple questions about these. Let's start with Mr. Tagano. Mr. Parker, towards the end of your exam, showed you medical records for Mr. Tagano that indicated abnormalities, correct?
Yes, sir.
Have you seen the actual liver function test?
On Mr. Tagano?
Yeah, the later ones.
Yes, sir.
You have?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was looking for them and I wasn't able to find them. Are his LFTs mildly elevated? Are they severely elevated?
Mildly elevated is our number. Yes, sir.
And he has fatty liver disease, correct?
He has what?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna use fatty liver disease because I don't remember the other thing you said. So,
He has steatosis in his liver, and that shows on the ultrasound.
okay. And I know what you said earlier. You testified that that is a common result from hydrogen intoxication, correct?
That is correct.
And you also said it's common with people with diabetes.
Correct.
Aside from continuing to have his liver function test corrected, are you recommending any other continuing care for Mr. Tagano at this time?
I would recommend that he also receive the elastography that I mentioned before, because what you're most worried about in all of these patients is the development or progression of fibrosis, scarring. That's the big concern.
Now, when you say development of fibrosis, that would indicate that they don't yet have fibrosis. Is that fair?
Well, I mean that in general. When we study patients, when I bring a patient in and they have liver disease, then they may or may not have fibrosis at that point. But if they have not had a fibroscan or elastography, you don't know whether they have scarring yet or not. So you have to do your baseline test to know whether they have it, And then if they do or do not have it, then you're still, if they don't have it, you're looking for development of it. Or if they already have it, then you're looking for progression.
And, I did not see Mr. Tagano had an elastography done since his acute liver failure, but he had an ultrasound done, right?
And I have not seen any elastography done, but I did see the ultrasound.
And the ultrasound came back normal?
No, it came back as steatosis.
Steatosis, I'm sorry, that's what it came back. That's right. Now, for Mr. Wren, is there any indication that Mr. Wren has continued liver function tests?
No, sir.
Is there any indication that Mrs. Wren has any continuing liver function?
I have not seen any, no.
And for them, the recommendations are the same as for Mr. Tagano, getting their liver function tests done and liver function tests performed and having a fiber scan?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now let's talk about, can you grab my water bottle? I'm sorry, it just drives me out. Thank you. As to Chris Noah Wren, the child, same question, is there any records indicating that he has continued to have elevated liver function tests?
None that I have seen.
Okay. Any records indicating that he continues to seek treatment related to his acute liver failure episode?
None that I'm aware.
Okay. And you would agree, and I believe this is, I'm going to try and direct, but I don't think this is from your report, that the histological changes they, and by they, I mean the patients, had in the past are presently not causing any problems. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement from everything I've seen.
Okay. And once again, your only future treatment recommendations are to continue the liver function test and to get a fiber scan, correct?
Yes, sir.
When you said you spoke to the Wrens, correct?
I did.
And what did they tell you about how Chris is doing?
Seems to be back to normal. Of course, he has autism, which makes it a little more difficult to sort of know exactly what's going on. And I met Noah, but it seems that he's returned back to his previous level.
Good. Let's talk about Harry Carrier. Going to do the same questions again. As you can tell, I'm getting into the groove here, Doctor. First question. Based on the records, any indication that she continues to have elevated liver function?
No, sir.
Okay. Any indication in the records that she continues to seek treatment? I'm sorry, start that. Let me start over. Aside from the orthopedic issues that you discussed, any other treatment that she related to her liver injuries that she sees? Sorry, that was a horrible question, and I'm going to ask it again. Other than the orthopedic issues, which I'll get to in a minute, is Hera Carrier seeking any treatment related to a liver failure episode?
None that I'm aware.
Okay. Were you aware that there's medical records indicating that her leg pain actually predates her acute liver failure episode?
Yeah, I am aware that some of those things existed before. Correct.
So if it existed before, would it be fair to say it's probably not a sequelae of her acute liver failure episode?
Not necessarily, because the problems of the acute liver failure could have made them worse or exacerbated them.
Have you seen anything in the records that would indicate they were worse or exacerbated from before?
Well, I haven't. I don't know what the baseline was, so that's a question I honestly cannot answer.
Okay.
Because I did not see medical records of what it was like before that versus after. I've seen the after.
Okay. Sorry, and let me ask you this question too. Do you think Kara has any physical restrictions at this time because of her liver failure?
No, sir, I don't believe she does.
Does she have any social restrictions?
No, sir.
What about Christopher Noah Wren? Does he have any physical restrictions as a result of his liver failure?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay, same thing for social. Is there any?
None that I know about.
Okay. And did you meet with the carriers?
I did.
And what did they tell you about Hera?
That obviously she was really, really sick at one point. You know, I think the thing that probably worried them the most at the beginning was not only nausea and vomiting, but vomiting blood. That's how she started out. But that she's recovered and doing well now.
They tell you she's playing, and she's playing sports now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And she seems to be doing well overall in school?
She seems to be doing well.
I have a question about hair biopsy, and I realize you're not a pathologist, but based on the report, there's no mention of fibrosis in her biopsy report.
That is the formula. That is
Say
the
that.
foundation and formula.
You're welcome.
Withdrawn.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm gonna take a step back, just so we got a clear record here. I understand you're not a pathologist, correct?
Correct.
And generally speaking, my understanding is when hepatologists read biopsies, they do them with a pathologist, is that correct?
No, sir, not necessarily. I've looked at thousands of biopsies now.
Okay.
And lots of times I do not need a pathologist to look at the biopsy.
Is that just because you've been doing this so long?
Yes, sir. I've studied it.
Kind of like the judge knows how to overrule my objections before
That's
they come
right.
out? No offense, Judge.
None to.
The biopsy report for Hera, you saw the biopsy report, right?
I did.
And the biopsy report does not mention fibrosis, does it?
It did not.
Now, Severin. According to his records, Mr. Severin Morales is not suffering from any ongoing elevated liver function tests, right?
That is correct.
And he is not having any continued treatment for his liver issues.
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. And do you know how long it took Severin's liver enzymes to normalize after his discharge?
I do not.
And is that because there's not many records after his discharge?
I have not seen those records. There may be some out there, but I have not seen them.
Okay. Did you speak with Mr. Morales?
Yeah, no.
No, okay. Did you read his trial testimony?
Yes,
Okay, so you talked about how Severin wants to be a YouTuber,
yes,
seems to be a social kid, seems to be doing well?
yes, sir.
Okay. And once again, Severin, any physical restrictions from his liver failure?
No, sir.
Any social restrictions?
None that I know about.
And once again, your continuing treatment recommendations are that he continue to get his liver function test twice a year and that he get a FibroScan, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, are you aware that Real Water actually agrees with you on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're not contending that the future treatment care you're recommending is inappropriate. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the Williams twins. And as far as to start with Lyric, for Lyric, once again, no ongoing abnormal allergies,
None that I'm aware of.
no ongoing treatment related to her liver injury,
No, sir.
no physical restrictions,
Correct.
no social restrictions,
Correct.
and same future care recommendations.
Yes, sir.
And for London, same questions. No abnormal allergies, correct?
None that I know about.
No ongoing care for her liver failure?
None that I'm aware of.
No social restrictions?
None that I'm aware
No physical restrictions?
of. None that I'm aware
You know what metabolic alkalosis is?
of. Not that I'm aware
You have water intoxication?
of. I have.
And do you drink a gallon and a half of water in an hour? Would that be water intoxication?
Depends on the patient. Could be.
You spoke with Miss Williams, right?
I did.
And based on what I recall from your deposition, you and Ms. Williams seemed, according to you, the kids were nice, happy, normal children. And that's a quote, is that fair?
That is correct.
And there's no issue now related to their acute liver failure episode, right?
That's what Mrs. Williams told me.
Now, on the whole, the kids seem to be doing pretty well.
Correct.
Thank you. That's all I have. No questions I have for you, Dr. Hutson. Appreciate it.
Just briefly, Dr. Hudson, may I proceed?
Sure.
Mr. Kaufmann was at your deposition, do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
Did Mr. Kaufmann, on the day of your deposition, was that believed to be March 12, 2024, did Mr. Kaufmann tell you at that point that Real Water conceded that its water product was defective and caused these plaintiffs those injuries?
Not that I remember.
First time you're hearing about this?
Yes, sir.
And then finally, did any of the questions that Mr. Kaufmann asked you change your opinions that you gave to this jury?
They did not change them.
And did you give those opinions to a reasonable degree of medical probability and uncertainty?
Yes, sir, I did.
Can you stand by those?
I stand by those.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Hutson.
Any questions from the jurors? Thanks, sir. Come on up. Doctor, we have some questions from some of our jurors.
Yes, sir.
To confirm, can you have normal range ALT, AST after having liver damage?
That is a great question, and I get asked that by my medical students all the time. You can have cirrhosis of the liver and have normal liver injury tests. I see it every single day. You do not have to have abnormal liver injury tests and have significant ongoing liver damage. Normal liver injury tests would say there's not any inflammation going on, but you can have stone cold cirrhosis at that time. So I see it all the time.
Next question. AST, ALT, INR, ammonia, what else do they look at on blood tests for liver function?
Albumin and protein are very important to look at because when the liver is not functioning correctly, it does not make protein and it does not make albumin. So we look at that. We also look at electrolytes. Electrolytes are sodium, potassium, chloride, all those things. Those things oftentimes are affected by the liver, and you'll see a low sodium with really advanced liver disease or advanced liver damage. Very common to see that. And kidney function. In kids, it's less common. Okay? Kids don't usually develop a concomitant kidney injury along with a liver injury. With adults, I see it all the time. Patients come in with acute liver failure and they dump their kidneys at the same time. And I can't tell you how many times, it's probably more common than not in adults with acute liver failure that they go into acute kidney failure as well, and I have them on dialysis.
Can the witness, can you re-explain bowel and intestinal symptoms caused by toxin buildup in liver?
Okay? I think it's a couple things. One is it's the toxins that are circulating through the blood that go into all the cells of the gut. All right, so that's one thing. The other thing is when you have liver failure, everything gets edematous. So the wall of the stomach gets edematous, the wall of the small intestine gets edematous, the wall of the colon gets edematous, full of fluid. All that stuff leads to those symptoms that we talked about of nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, very common, and even constipation.
What is non-viral hepatitis?
Non-viral hepatitis is anything that causes inflammation of the liver that's not a virus. It's kind of self-explanatory. So in other words, when we say that, we basically say it's not hepatitis A, it's not hepatitis B, it's not hepatitis C, it's not hepatitis D, it's not hepatitis E. Believe it or not, we have all those types of viral hepatitis. So that's what it means. We've ruled out those 5 things. And in these patients and plaintiffs, all those things were ruled out by the institutions that they were seen in.
How is it the different, okay, I'll re-emphasize it. How is that different than or similar to hepatitis A, B, or C?
Okay, just as I explained. Right.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
This very briefly, now.
Those questions just prove that we aren't perfect in terms of asking all the questions. We appreciate those questions.
It also shows how smart the jury is.
Agreed. And I just want to make sure, because I truly appreciate the question. Mr. Kaufmann asked you on cross about the normal test results in some of the plaintiffs after being released or discharged from the hospital.
Yes, sir.
And so given what the question was from the jury, is that more support for monitoring after the fact?
Yes, sir, it is.
And does that also mean that although you may have a normal liver function test, AST and ALT, it doesn't mean that you haven't suffered permanent fibrosis or even cirrhosis?
That is correct. Every one of these kids could have significant fibrosis and have normal liver injury tests.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Hudson.
You follow?
Yes, Your Honor. Just a couple. Aside from Severn, is there any evidence that any other plaintiff here has fibrosis?
No, sir. None of the other plaintiffs.
And the other thing, one other thing you talked about was you were explaining the GI symptoms that are associated with liver failure. When the liver starts to function again, will those GI symptoms should those GI symptoms resolve?
Yes, sir, they will, because then the toxins start getting cleared by the liver and the edema goes away.
So basically, once the liver starts to recover, the person starts to recover, is that fair?
That is correct.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you so
Any
much.
other questions? Thank you, Doc. The council can come.
Can I ask that down?
Yes, thank you, sir. Just be careful what you're doing.
Watch it hit that.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and take our afternoon break. Let's come back at 3:15. Remain recess. You're admonished not to talk or converse amongst yourselves or with anyone else on the subject connected with this trial. Do not read, watch, or listen to any report of or commentary of the trial or any person connected with this trial by any medium of information, including without limitation to social media, text, newspaper, television, internet, radio. Do not visit the scene of any events mentioned during the trial. Do not undertake any investigation. Do not do any posts and communications on any social networking sites. Do not do any independent research, including internet searches. Do not more or express any opinion on any subject connected with the trial until it is finally submitted. Please see back at 3:15.
Please rise for the jury.